All right, good evening, everyone. It's been a minute since I recorded, but I come to y'all tonight with Getting Closer to God. We're going to be reading the chapter Living with an Attitude of Gratitude. All right, without further ado, let's get to it. Nothing is easier than fault finding. It takes no talent, no self-denial, no brains, and no character are required to get set up in the grumbling business, said Robert West. Excuse me. 6 weeks into the desert, the Israelites had to bid farewell to Elim with its 70 palm trees and 12 water springs. As they made their trek through the wilderness, they discovered they could not live off their memories, wonderful as those memories were. When their food supply dwindled, they felt stranded and betrayed, no matter how many miracles God had done for them. They did not have the confidence that He would provide for their future. Hunger and hot sand made their faith evaporate. Complaining is contagious. And the whole congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the sons of Israel said to them, "Would that we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, when we ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." A few tongues began to wag, and soon everyone was caught up with this national uproar, like poison sprinkled into a water supply. The murmuring spread. Their complaint was directed toward God's appointed leader, Moses. They cynically accused him of bringing them into the desert to watch them die. To have died in Egypt, they said, would have been better than dying of hunger in the blistering sun. Moses felt the sharp sting of their complaint. They intended to hurt him, and they did. No matter that he had risked his life for them, no past sacrifice could erase their present anger. No, let me read that again. No matter that he had risked his life for them, no past sacrifice could erase their present hunger or anger. The miracles of yesterday were apparently of no help in seeing a miracle today. God had met their need for water at Meribah, but they evidently did not believe He could take care of their need for bread. God gave the people a surprising reply. "I have heard the grumblings of the sons of Israel. Speak to them, saying, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. And you shall know that I am the Lord your God." First, He assured them that He would feed them. In fact, bread would be rained on them from heaven. In the morning, there would be a manna, and meat would be given in the evening. Excuse me. Their complaint had been duly registered, and God would respond. But second, and most important, God was upset with their attitude. Though they directed their complaint to Moses, they were actually being critical of the Almighty. Moses said, "For the Lord hears your grumbling, which you grumble against Him. And what are we? Your grumblings are not against us, but against the Lord." Logically, it must be so, for Moses was God's representative. Therefore, to complain against Moses was a complaint against God. Just think, it was the pillar of cloud that led them into the barren wilderness where there was neither water nor food. Moses, who followed God's instructions, could hardly be blamed for taking a sharp turn into the wilderness. God had promised to take them all the way to Canaan, and this was the route he chose. They were hungry by divine appointment, though we usually don't think of it this way. Complaining against circumstances is complaining against God. Even when men curse the weather, they are unwittingly cursing God, who, after all, is in charge of the wind, the hail, or the sunshine. Let me read that again. Even when men curse the weather, they are unwittingly cursing God, who, after all, is in charge of the wind, the hail, or the sunshine. How you gonna curse somebody that's in charge of the weather? It don't make sense. Let's continue. Even when we grumble against, or even if we grumble about our health, our difficulties at work, or lack of our money, we are implicating God since he has all of these circumstances under his supervision and control. Even the very hairs of our head are numbered. Certainly there are some things we can change, but there are few in number in comparison with the many things that are well beyond our reach and control. God had led the Israelites to the edge of despair that they might get closer to him. He knew that we usually do not trust him unless we have to. Blessed are those who are convinced that everything is under his sovereign control. In this case, God made sure that the Israelites would have to trust him every single day. They will be given just enough bread for each day, so they could never be complacent. It's just like in the prayer, give us this day our daily bread, just enough for the day. Not hold on to yesterday's bread and not worry about tomorrow's bread, but only worry about today's bread right now. Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether or not they will walk in my instruction. Not until they were in a tight corner did God open the door, and they would be in a tight corner every day. God chose to feed the Israelites because of his promise to bring them into the land. I know of no other period in history where God fed his people with manna from heaven. In our day, God's people have often starved to death or have been put to death by evil men. God promises only that he will walk with us through the fire, not that we shall be exempt from it. In Exodus 15, God lets the Israelites be thirsty. In this chapter, he lets them be hungry. God chose to test them with the very essentials of life. He taught them that their very existence was daily held in his caring hands. If we want to delight God's heart, we must trust him. We must believe that he will be there for us no matter what. Let me read that one more time. He taught them that their very existence was daily held in his caring hands. If we want to delight God's heart, we must trust him. We must believe that he will be there for us no matter what. Meditate on that. How was this experience designed to get the nation of Israel closer to God? They were to trust his leading. We've already learned that since God was their map and compass, they were in the desert by divine appointment. The cloud guided them by day and the pillar of fire by night. God would not lead them to a place where he could not keep them. Let me read that again. God would not lead them to a place where he could not keep them. So anytime you're in a place, right? Let's say you're in a club. You're in a place, basically when you go to a club, it's like a restricted area. God is there with you, but more attacks can happen because that's basically a restricted area, right? Versus when you're in a church, obviously that's not a restricted area to Christ. So the more in an area you're in, the more evil of an area you're in, the more of a restricted area it is for Christ. Not to say that, he can't help you in that restricted area, but it's recommended to stay out of that restricted area. Let's continue. The cloud guided them. Okay, could not keep them. He would not abandon his adopted children. His integrity was at stake. God tested the Israelites, but of course, this was a mighty test for Moses too. Think of the responsibility that weighed on his shoulders. During his days in Midian, Moses experienced the barrenness of the desert and knew that not so much as a single family could survive apart from a series of miracles. To believe God for himself was one thing. To believe God for the whole congregation was quite another. Apparently, Moses believed that the Israelites did not. They nostalgically longed for Egypt and compared it with their present predicament. They forgot the beatings. They did not remember how they had hunted for a straw like scavengers to make the full quota of bricks. They forgot their humiliation, their powerlessness, and their pain. All they could think of were the pots of meat. For now, at least, Egypt looked better than the wilderness. With that, we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt. They intoned. They also forgot the song of triumph they had sung after crossing the Red Sea. They forgot how the water was sweetened at Marah and the beautiful provision at Elim. They blocked their miraculous past out of their minds and could see only the sand that lay before them. Their memories were no better than their eyes. Satan wants us to distort the past, to remember the cheap thrills of our Egypt experience. He wants us to forget that we were deceived, enslaved to various lusts and pleasures, spending our life in malice and envy, hating one another. What does Satan do? Steal, kill, and destroy. To blot out the memory of the bitter taste of sin is one of the devil's oldest strategies. We forget that it is better to be in a barren desert by the will of God than to be fed at the smorgasbord often by Satan and the world. And this is not to say, right, that okay, I just had a brain fart. I'm gonna just keep reading. The congregation distorted the past and feared the future. They expected to die of starvation in the wilderness. They felt deceived and angry with their leaders and angry with their God. With their memories riveted on yesterday and their emotions in flux about tomorrow, the possibilities of the present moment evaporated like steam from a boiling kettle. Someone has said that many people live their lives crucified between two thieves, the regrets of yesterday and the anxieties of tomorrow. What did I just say earlier about the daily bread? If you worry about yesterday's bread, if you try to carry yesterday's bread to the next day, it's going to mold, right? And if you try to worry about yesterday or tomorrow, you're worrying about tomorrow. You're not supposed to be doing that. It's only one path for everybody, and that's God's path. Not to say that, we all make mistakes. We're human, right? And that's why I believe it was in the plan for us to learn from those mistakes to grow and be closer to God. Let's continue. If we are focused on either the past or the future, we cannot enjoy the present. And that's ironic too, present. When you get something for Christmas, what is that called? A present, right? It's not called a past. It's not called a future. Your gift is not the future. Your gift is not the past. Your gift is the present. Our past almost always stands to condemn us. Our future is always uncertain. And if we believe the worst about tomorrow, as all of us are prone to do, we will face only darkness. A pessimist, it is said, can hardly wait for the future so that he can look back on it with regret. The Lord was testing the Israelites, saying in effect, "You have seen my glory in leading you out of Egypt with signs and wonders. Why cannot you believe me for your future? With one hand I will lead you into the desert that you might be hungry. With the other hand I will feed you." Moses was learning that God was not merely the one who could deliver his people. He was the one who could sustain them as well. The map from Egypt to Canaan did not only include the Red Sea, but the desert. They would have strength as long as this journey would last. If only they had remembered that they were in a tight place by divine appointment. And as I emphasized in a previous chapter, God is just as ready to help us in a tight place that is of our own making as he is to help us in those tight places into where he has led us. So either way, rather you put yourself in that hole or he led you in that tight place, he will help you regardless. So that's not for me to say I'm judging you for where you come from or anything of that nature. I'm not judging anybody. I don't judge people. That's not my job. My job is to give you the message of the word and take it with a grain of salt. One thing I'm always say, study to show yourself approved, right? Let's continue. Even hunger can be a divine appointment. They were to trust his feeding. God had promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that he would bring their descendants into the land that would be their possession forever. Was there any chance that he would not provide? Of course not. The invisible hand of divine providence was always working to make sure that the nation would survive. The responsibility of finding bread fell on God. We've learned that in response to their complaining, God promised them bread and meat. The next morning, after the sun evaporated the dew, small round cakes dotted the ground. The people didn't know what it was and asked, "What is it?" In Hebrew, manhu. Moses explained that this was the bread God had given to them. It looked like a coriander seed and tasted like wafers made with honey, because it was sent from heaven. The psalmist Asaph referred to it as the bread of angels. Two instructions were given concerning the manna. First, each person was to gather just enough for himself and his family. And the two sons of Israel did so and gathered so much, and some gathered much and some little. When they measured it with an omer, he who had gathered much had no excess, and he who had gathered little had no lack. The rabbis interpreted this to mean that whatever quantity a man might gather, when he measured it in his tent, he had just as much as he needed to give an omer, about 2 quarts, to every person in the house. Centuries later, Christ miraculously fed a multitude and yet asked that the fragments be gathered to nothing but be lost. Second, they were not to store any of the manna for the next day. If they did, it would breed worms and become foul. The one exception was on the 6th day, when they were permitted to gather enough for 2 days. This is the Sabbath day. So the manna remained extra fresh on that day by the meticulous hand of God. This provision gives incidental evidence that the Sabbath was actually kept even before the giving of the law of Sinai. What could be clearer than the instructions? Yet some of the people simply did not believe God's word, but had to test his instructions for themselves. I'm going to go ahead and end it right there. This is part 1 of the chapter. This is part 1 of Living with an Attitude of Gratitude. And this is the book, Getting Closer to God by Erwin W. Lutzer. Check this book out. This is a really good book. And yeah, that's tonight's reading. Thank you. Have a good night. Blessings.